You are listening to the Marc Guzman Podcast Experience.
Now, did East Bay, or not East Bay, but did the punk rock develop out of the San Francisco Bay Area?
No. England and New York both vie for who did it first.
Okay.
I think that there was, things like Lou Reed, the Modern Lovers, Patti Smith, coming out of New York, and places like Boston and stuff. There were the inklings of what, proto-punk, pre-punk, and then the Ramones happened. And I think there's a quote from Lou Reed where he says, "Okay, it's done. We're over. Somebody did it." Like where you're listening to it and you don't know whether or not to laugh or to just be so excited. Like the Ramones to me are really probably my favorite punk band. But in England they had this working class thing. There was a lot of, the Sex Pistols and the Clash and, the Damned, and there were all these things coming there. So those are the two places. But soon after, punk came to San Francisco. And you've got Avengers and Dead Kennedys and Flipper and, Pearl Harbor and the Explosions was another band that came out of that era. And so it kind of goes New York, England, San Francisco.
Okay. And by that time it's spreading. By the time it gets to San Francisco, it's going everywhere else so fast. And then it just becomes everyone gets
Los
their own
Angeles
regional sound. You got your LA punk, San Francisco punk, New York punk. Then it's still punk, but now it's no longer defined by just punk. Now it's the region of what where your punk is coming from.
Yeah.
New York punk, San Francisco punk, Chicago, DC punk, for example.
The thing about San Francisco was that Bill Graham, who was the major rock promoter, he makes an appearance in Apocalypse Now. He's like the most famous rock promoter of all time. He was doing these big rock and roll acts. So punk starts really kind of picking up and getting more popular, and these kids that are coming to his shows are breaking things and riding all over the place, and he's like, I do not like this. And so it was relegated to being in a Filipino supper club in what is that district up there north
Beach?
North Beach, yeah, called the Mabuhay Gardens. So this Filipino supper club became it's like CBGB's for our coast. And CBGB's is the famous New York punk bastion. We had a Mabuhay Gardens. Couple years ago, the artful punk bands that weren't just about the hardcore. It wasn't just all fast. Start to Dianne Feinstein start shutting clubs down. The Kevin Collins kidnapping got everybody kind of up in arms and worried about derelicts and crazy people being around. And then hardcore came out of Los Angeles and it started moving this way. And then a lot of kind of white kids with a lot of anger issues looking for a place to belong started glomming onto kind of racist nationalist stuff, the skinhead movement. So that kind of came into hardcore because the aggression was there. Mm-hmm. And the people in San Francisco, at least, were like, whoa, we were doing this to be artful and to be community minded, and now we're just afraid. And so at that point, that's when the East Bay came into play, saying we need a place that's all ages, that's no violence, no alcohol, no drugs. And that's how that all came to be with Gilman.
I think that was the biggest shift in the genre itself, because you had 21 and over clubs, but then as soon as the East Bay opens on Gilman and it's all ages, now you have the ability for a slightly younger generation, more goofy type to it.
Very much
and then
so.
you see it evolve, and so it's really neat to see how all that progressed, and it explains how the genre is.
The goofiness makes it easier to be a part of. Yeah. You don't feel like you got to be cool to come and fit in,
That's how we got involved.
Yeah.
I was cracking up at that scene where Billy Joe is talking about he heard about the Gilman Club,
right? And
they're like, "Yeah, there's mosh pits in there, but no one really fights in there. They just ride tricycles in circles."
Yeah, and they roll you up in a carpet and spin you around. He says, yeah. And that as a kid, if you see what punk is, it looks kind of scary, but then suddenly you're like, wait, maybe that sounds pretty fun. right? And so it was nonviolent. It was fun. So the East Bay really kind of was an answer to what was happening in punk. The violence, the clubs were ripping people off. There was no place for young people to go. And that's when the East Bay popped up. So I thought it was a pretty inspiring thing to cover. So
How long